Today we're going to do a video that Epic History just put out. This has been recommended to me a few times and I saw it when I was scrolling on YouTube and it looked like a good video. It's something that I'm interested in and want to get into. It is the HMS Victory, the Total Guide Part 1. As always, if you like the content, want to support the channel, like, comment, subscribe. You could join the Discord. There's a bunch of history conversations and really all sorts of conversations that are happening over there. So you could join if you want to. That will be down in the description box below. With that being said, let's jump into it. The HMS Victory.
1805. Britain is at war with France. The French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte will soon dominate mainland Europe. But at sea, Britain's Royal Navy reigns supreme. That year, Napoleon wins one of his greatest victories against the Russians and Austrians at Austerlitz. But 6 weeks earlier, off the coast of Spain, the British win a battle of much more lasting strategic significance. Off Cape Trafalgar, the Royal Navy inflicts a crushing defeat on the combined fleet of France and Spain. Enemy losses are devastating. British naval...
Yeah, who was it that led that? Nelson? Was that who it was?
Superiority will not be seriously challenged again for the rest of the war. Britain goes on to play a leading role in Napoleon's eventual defeat. Its greatest contribution? Its wooden walls. The Royal Navy. Britain is the world's largest naval power, with 136 ships of the line and 110,000 men at sea. The Navy protects the homeland from invasion. It allows Britain to project force into Europe with raids and expeditionary forces. It cuts off enemy trade while protecting Britain's own. It isolates and seizes overseas colonies, including the vastly profitable sugar islands of the West Indies. It undermines enemy economies, while allowing Britain to use its own financial strength to sustain its allies. In 2 decades of war with France, Britain wins a series of naval battles that ensure it can carry out these war-winning strategies effectively. Among the Royal Navy's most formidable warships, HMS Victory, a first-rate ship of the line, the most powerful class of warship afloat.
God, these old school ships are so freaking awesome.
104 guns,
Damn.
820 men. A single broadside
104 guns. Man.
from Victory packs more weight of iron than every gun in Wellington's army at Waterloo.
And he's still gonna kick your ass at Waterloo.
This is Epic History TV's guide to a legendary Napoleonic warship. This video is sponsored by Fabulous, the #1 self-care app that helps you build better habits and achieve your goals. Some struggles many of us face on a daily, great routines into your daily habits and take part in all their programs and exercises. Start building your ideal daily routine today. The first 500 people to click on the link in our video description will get 25% off Fabulous Premium. Thanks to Fabulous for sponsoring this video. Today, HMS Victory lies in dry dock in Portsmouth,
Yeah, go support Epic History.
on England's south coast, a famous visitor attraction and the world's oldest commissioned warship. She's a remarkable survivor from a vanished world of sail-powered warships and global struggles between Europe's great empires. Victory was built to boost British naval power at the height of one of these struggles, the 7 Years' War. Construction began at Chatham Royal Dockyard in 1759. She was designed by Sir Thomas Slade, the foremost British naval architect of the age. Around 6,000 trees went into Victory. Most were British oak, though her lower masts were originally New England pine. Her keel was elm, her upper masts and yards more flexible fir and spruce. The result, launched in 1765, was soon considered a masterpiece. A ship bristling with firepower, with the speed and handling of a much lighter vessel. Victory was not completed in time to take part in the 7 Years' War. She first saw action 13 years later in the American War of Independence, leading the capture of a French convoy off Ushant. When the Revolutionary Wars broke out against France, HMS Victory was the British flagship at the Allied blockade of Toulon. Then in 1797, she was Admiral Jarvis's flagship at his great victory over the Spanish at Cape St. Vincent. Victory was by then 32 years old, far beyond her life expectancy of 18 years. Worn out, she was briefly threatened with being turned into one of Britain's notorious prison ships, known as hulks. No one would have guessed that her greatest hour still lay ahead of her. Because at the last minute, Victory was reprieved and began a major 3-year refit that cost more than she did to build. She returned to service in 1803 as Vice Admiral Nelson's flagship. 2 years later, she would lead the British attack at Trafalgar and win her place in naval legend.
I wonder if they upgraded it because of, because it was a well-known, well-respected ship. So I wonder if that went into why they decided to upgrade it instead of, kind of cycling it out like I'm guessing happened to a lot of these warships. I'm curious about that.
By the Napoleonic Wars, a first-rate ship of the line was the world's largest and most sophisticated weapon of war, and it needed a huge crew to work efficiently. In 1805, Victory's complement was around 820, every man and boy with his designated role. From the Admiral of the fleet to the ship's captain, naval lieutenants and marine officers, midshipmen, warrant officers, clerks and stewards, petty officers and their mates, sailors of the able, ordinary and landlubber variety, Royal Marines, right down to the 31 ship's boys. Before we examine HMS Victory's arrangement and structure, a quick reminder of some common nautical terms. The right side of the ship, starboard. The left side of the ship, larboard, which only became port in 1844 to reduce confusion.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that.
The back of the ship, her stern. The front, her stem. Towards the stern was aft or abaft. Towards the stem was forward or fore. Victory's middle gun deck was 186 feet long. The top of her main mast was 205 feet above the waterline.
Damn.
Victory's top speed was 10 knots, or 11.5 miles per hour, fast for a ship her size. In 1780, she received the latest British naval innovation, copper sheathing for her hull. This protected her timbers from shipworm, barnacles and weeds, keeping her solid and streamlined. Victory, like all ships of the line, was ship-rigged, meaning she had 3 masts, a foremast, mainmast and mizzenmast, and a bowsprit. Each mast was made up of sections. The lower mast, secured deep in the ship's hold, rose up through the decks to the fighting top, which served as a platform for sharpshooters in battle. Above it, the topmast. Then the cross trees, which secured the top gallant mast, pronounced topgallant. The cross trees was the lookout's position, there being no crow's nests in the Navy. Each mast supported several yards, to which the sails were fastened or bent. Victory's rigging, 26 miles of rope and 786 pulleys in all, came in two types. Standing rigging gave structural support to the masts. Forestays and backstays kept them braced fore and aft. The shrouds secured the masts laterally, and their rope steps, called ratlins, were how you climbed the masts. Experienced seamen reached the tops by climbing the futtock shrouds. On a rolling sea, this could mean climbing out over the ocean upside down, so novices were advised to use the lubber's hole. The other type of rigging was running rigging, used to operate the ship's yards and sails, and included halyards, bowlines, and clewlines.
Could you guys do that? Could y'all go climb? Because you're not like strapped in, you're just climbing up there. Could you climb, I don't know, 100 to 150 feet above the water and go upside down? You know, where if you fall, you're going straight into the water. I don't know. I don't think I could do it. I'm scared to death of heights, though, but still, I don't think I could do it. I can't believe it moves faster than I thought it would by a decent amount. Its top speed is faster than I thought. I don't know, just in my head, with how big it is, I did not expect it to move that fast. I thought it would be extremely slow.
Victory had 37 sails with which to harness the power of the wind, her only real form of propulsion. They had a total area of 6,500 square yards, about the size.
Could you imagine seeing something like that? If you're standing on land and you look out to the ocean and seeing something like that coming your direction, that's what I say about why I love the old ships and this sort of time period on the water, because that's just such an interesting thing to me. I mean, these were just such big bastards, and they had so much power, and they just are I don't know, beautiful, elegant looking, basically masters of death, you know, for lack of a better term.
Size of a football pitch, though not all sails could be set together, nor did more sail necessarily mean more speed. Her large square sails included the forecourse, fore topsail, pronounced topsail, and fore topgallant sail, pronounced foretogonsal. On the mainmast, the main course, main topsail, and main togonsal. The mizzen mast carried a fore and aft rigged sail known as a spanker or driver, as well as mizzen topsail and mizzen togonsal, while the bowsprit could carry a variety of fore and aft rigged sails, most commonly a jib and flying jib. Another 11 fore and aft rigged sails, known as staysails, could also be set. Victory's upper deck, or weather deck, was actually several decks: the forecastle, waist, quarterdeck, and poop deck. The forecastle is a shortened form of forecastle, a term dating back to the Middle Ages when warships carried raised fighting platforms at both ends. The forecastle housed the belfry, containing the all-important ship's bell, rung regularly day and night to mark the change of watch. It also housed two 12-pounder guns. All guns in this period were described by the weight of shot they fired. So 12-pounders fired a solid iron ball known as round shot that weighed 12 pounds, about the
Yeah, it's a big bitch.
same as a bowling ball. The forecastle also mounted two 68-pounder carronades. The carronade was another British innovation, a short, large-caliber gun, fearsome at close quarters, but lacking a cannon's range or accuracy. The beak deck gave access to the bowsprit and the head, 6 outdoor toilets for several hundred seamen and marines, which emptied straight into the sea below. The waist is where 4 of Victory's 6 boats were stowed. All large ships carried several boats. They were essential for ferrying men and supplies from ship to ship and ship to shore, for towing or turning the ship in adverse winds, and for launching amphibious attacks. The quarterdeck was HMS Victory's command centre and housed a total of 12 12-pounder guns. From here, the ship was steered using the ship's wheel. This was the responsibility of one of the ship's 8 quartermasters, assisted by his mates. The ship's wheel was connected by rope to the tiller 3 decks below, which was in turn connected to the rudder.
Interesting.
The binnacle, just 4 of the wheel, contained the ship's magnetic compasses and a lantern by which to see them.
This old technology stuff is super interesting to me. How they got all of this stuff to work without, modern technology or even modern-ish technology.
Cabins for the captain's secretary and the ship's master were located either side of the ship's wheel. Each shared their small room with a 12-pounder gun. The stern area
They've got those 12-pounders stocked in everywhere.
Of the quarterdeck comprised the captain's cabins, a dining room, sleeping cabin, and at the very stern of the ship, his day cabin, all sharing space with 4 12-pounders. The captain also had a private toilet, known as the quarter gallery. Above the captain's cabins, the poop deck, which provided good visibility and access to the mizzenmast. It also housed the signal locker, containing the coloured flags used to communicate with other ships and shore. The Royal Navy's signals code had been recently revised by Admiral Howe. His system involved 14 flags, which could be arranged in various combinations to convey 340 messages. For emphasis, a gun might be fired. At night, signalling was by pre-agreed combinations of gunfire, coloured lanterns, and rockets. A Napoleonic ship of the line was, in essence, a giant floating gun battery designed to pulverize enemy warships and shore installations. Victory's 3 largest decks were all about her guns, as indicated by their name, the upper, middle, and lower gun deck.
You've got them in each of the individual captain's rooms or chambers or whatever, so yeah, I can imagine they're going to be everywhere else in the ship.
The upper gun deck housed 30 12-pounder guns, 15 on each side. Forward in the round houses was the head for junior officers, rank bringing slightly more privacy and comfort.
So when they go to destroy cannons of this time period, don't they break off that back piece? So on the back of the cannons, they have the round piece that comes off of the end. Isn't that what they did to destroy them at the time? They would go by and break those off? I'm pretty sure that's how it worked, but I'm not 100% certain. So if I'm wrong, correct me.
The sick bay was located in the forward area of the upper gun deck, as it got more fresh air and sunlight than the lower decks. It was screened off from the rest of the deck by canvas partitions. The surgeon's assistants, nicknamed Loblolly Boys for the soup they fed to patients, also slept here in their hammocks. HMS Victory was a first-rate ship of the line, defined as one that carried 100 guns or more. They were the most powerful vessels afloat, and so admirals often chose them as their flagships, the command vessels for a fleet or squadron. Several renowned British admirals took Victory as their flagship at various times, including Earl Howe and Earl St. Vincent. The most famous, of course, was Viscount Nelson. An admiral required his own suitably grand quarters, located in the stern section of the upper gun deck. These comprised an anteroom, and a dining room, which also served as a meeting room. In the sleeping cabin, the Admiral usually...
Yeah, see that back part of the cannon back there? That's what I'm talking about on the very, very ass end of it. I've seen old cannons in person where those are broken off, and I want to say that that's why they're broken, is to put them out of commission. But again, Admiral's quarters too got guns everywhere. I mean, literally guns everywhere. They just stuffed this thing full of cannons.
Usually slept in a suspended cot. But Nelson preferred a campaign bed like this one, easier to get in and out of with only one arm. At the very stern lay the Admiral's day cabin, which served as his office and private space. The Admiral would spend much of his day here, submerged in the meetings, paperwork and administration required in the running of a fleet. The Admiral's cabins, like all cabins on the gun decks and quarterdeck, were formed by removable wooden panels. This meant when a ship cleared for action before battle, the cabins could be rapidly dismantled and carried with furniture and personal items down into the hold.
Interesting.
The purpose of this was to allow the gun crews to work their guns without obstruction.
Yeah, so I was wondering how that would work, because when you've got them just jammed in everywhere, the guns, I was curious how that was going to work whenever you have, you know, a table or bed or a wall or door. You know, there's stuff everywhere because these are living quarters. So that's interesting. Everything's removable for the most part. And so they just sweep all that stuff, they take it down, and then it turns into a full gun deck.
The middle gun deck housed 28 24-pounder guns. Heavier guns were lower in the ship for greater stability.
Yeah.
The ship's galley, a kitchen and giant iron stove, was where the ship's cook and his mates prepared meals for the crew.
Okay, so to put into just a little bit of context how big these guns are, for the Battle of the Alamo, so this is 1836, which is obviously after this point in history. When Santa Anna gets to the Alamo and basically says to surrender, the Texans fire off the biggest cannon they have, which is an 18-pounder, as like a show of defiance, right? That was considered huge. Huge. That was their like big bastard cannon, right? 18-pounder. This, you know, part of the ship has these 24-pound guns lined up all across it. Just wild.
The stern section was known as the wardroom, where commissioned officers dined and slept. At night, around 300 sailors and marines slept on this deck, their hammocks strung up between the guns. The deck below was the lower gun deck. This housed the Victory's heaviest guns, her 32-pounders. And at night, more than half the crew, around 460 men, slept here. This
32-pounder, that is the size of a freaking cake pan. That's how like big in diameter that is. The size of a cake pan. That is wild. God, that thing could do damage.
This plan of HMS Bedford, a contemporary third-rate ship of the line, shows how crowded it could be below decks. This far down in the ship, gun ports were usually kept shut because they were close to the waterline. With little fresh air and so many men living down here, the smells of the lower gun deck could be notoriously challenging. The stern area, separated by canvas screens, was known as the gun room. This was where warrant officers dined, with screened-off sleeping quarters for the master gunner, chaplain, and 2 junior lieutenants. They shared the gun room with the ship's tiller, a large wooden beam connecting the ship's rudder to the ship's wheel via a series of ropes and pulleys. The tiller is not currently in situ, but the strip of canvas marks its position. The beam would swing through the room when the ship turned, so anyone dining in the gunroom was wise to mind their head.
Wow.
Below the lower gun deck was the orlop deck, a warren of small cabins and stores beneath the waterline, lit only by lanterns. The forward section contained storerooms and cabins for the boatswain and carpenter. The more open area by the main mast was known as the cockpit, fore and aft. The midshipmen berthed and messed here, but in battle it became the surgeon's operating theatre. At the Battle of Trafalgar, after Vice Admiral Nelson was shot on the quarterdeck by a French sharpshooter, he was carried down to the orlop. Victory's surgeon was unable to save him, and this is where he died. Off the aft cockpit,
That's a long way down. For somebody to get shot up top, that's a long way to have to carry them down to get treated.
lay a series of cramped compartments, including personal storerooms for the captain and first lieutenant, the steward's room for issuing rations brought up from the hold, the surgeon's cabin and his dispensary, and various other cabins and storerooms. Forward and aft, hanging magazines held ready-made cartridges for the guns sent up from the main magazine. The orlop deck was surrounded by a passage known as the Carpenter's Walk, which gave the carpenter and his mates easy access to the ship's hull to plug any leaks. At the very bottom of the ship lay the hold, around 50,000 cubic feet, holding provisions for up to 6 months at sea. It was lined with 257 tons of iron ballast to keep the ship stable. This was covered by 200 tons of shingle, additional ballast, which provided a stable bed for the ship's 150-gallon water casks. These alone weighed roughly 300 tons at the start of a voyage. Other barrels contained 50 tons of salt beef, 50 tons of salt pork, and 45 tons of ship's biscuit. Various storerooms below contained items such as flour, spirits, tar, and paint. The shot locker contained 100 tons of iron shot. Last but not least, the most vulnerable part of the ship, the Grand Magazine, holding up to 35 tons of gunpowder in 784 barrels.
Damn.
A fire here would cause an explosion that obliterated the ship and anyone aboard. Or if water got in, the gunpowder would be useless in battle. Therefore, elaborate precautions were taken to keep the magazine safe, including fire doors, fire-retardant plaster walls, copper sheathing to avoid sparks and keep out moisture and rats. The forward section of the magazine was the filling room. Here, loose gunpowder was scooped from this powder bin into cloth bags to make cartridges for the guns. Lanterns were kept safely behind glass in an adjacent light room. Until required, ready cartridges were stored in racks on either side of the filling room. In an age before steam or electrical power, all the ship's heavy lifting had to be done by manpower. Mechanical assistance came from 2 capstans, the main capstan and jeer capstan. These were effectively giant winches, which extended vertically through the middle and lower gun decks. To turn them, bars were inserted into the capstan head, with up to 10 men pushing each bar. Using both decks, this meant 260 men were working the capstan for the heaviest jobs, such as raising the main anchor or hoisting a gun. The work was often accompanied by a fiddler, a shanty, and the stamp of feet. Victory carried 7 anchors in total. The heaviest, the best bower anchor, weighed 4 tons and was rigged at the starboard bow. The small bower anchor on the larboard side was only slightly smaller. Sheet, kedge and stream anchors served as spares, and for keeping the ship stationary in small harbours or rough weather. All wooden ships leak at sea, even before hulls are split by cannonballs or hidden reefs. Victory had 4 crank-operated chain pumps, which could pump water out of the ship at approximately 1,300 gallons per minute, about 300 jerry cans worth. She also had 2 elm pumps for pumping seawater into the ship for washing and putting out fires. In the late 18th century, HMS Victory and ships like her were the most
1,300 gallons a minute, that's pretty dang quick.
sophisticated and advanced machines in the world. Massive floating batteries that could remain at sea for 6 months or more and traverse the globe. In the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars, they battled for naval supremacy, most dramatically in giant fleet actions. It was a contest.
Imagine that you live somewhere in the world. I mean, because the British are almost everywhere in this time period here. Imagine that you are somewhere in the world where you have ships, but nothing that even remotely comes close to something like this, right? And you are standing on the shore and see something like this coming up, to the port. You have to be thinking, this is a spaceship and these are aliens. I mean, seriously. You have to think like that there's no way it's possible that humans built this. That's one of the really interesting parts to me about technology historically, is all of this old stuff to us today is just the very cutting edge at one time, and people were just astounded by it. We think today, imagine if somebody, however long ago could see like what cell phones are like or whatever. That's the same thing with all of these other technologies historically.
That Britain won decisively. The consequences for Napoleon were disastrous. But for all Victory's qualities, it was not ship design that gave Britain the edge in the war at sea. It was the men who sailed her. British commanders and crews were experienced, capable and aggressive. In the next video, we'll see how they sailed and fought a ship like Victory, and how they lived aboard her. Our deep thanks to the National Museum of the Royal Navy and HMS Victory for their help in making this series. Victory is now embarking on an exciting new phase of her long and dramatic history. A major 10-year conservation project to ensure her survival far into the future. The work is guided by the latest scientific and historical research, and will involve removing and replacing rotting timber and other structural repairs. And the great news is that the ship remains fully open to visitors throughout. Visit during the project, and you'll even get to see conservation work up close, with expert shipwrights on hand to explain what's happening. For more information...
Yeah, that would be awesome. I did not know it was in a museum today. Okay, so that was the HMS Victory Part 1. Really, really great video. I will get, I have a couple of other videos that I'm working on. I have an 1848 video that I'm working on. Obviously, the next part of the Swedish Rangers series that I'm working on. So all of that will come out as soon as I can get it done. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Help me keep building the channel over here, and I'll see you all next time.